the first verse. Elisha said, listen, this is God's word. The famine's over. This time tomorrow, food will be plentiful. A handful of meal for a shekel, 2 handfuls of grain for a shekel. The market at the city gate will be buzzing. The attendant on whom the king leaned for support said to the holy man, you expect us to believe that? Trapdoors opening in the sky and food tumbling out? You'll watch it with your own eyes, he said, but you will not eat so much as a mouthful. It happened that 4 lepers were sitting just outside the city gate. They said to one another, what are we doing sitting here at death's door? If we enter the famine-struck city, we'll die. If we stay here, we'll die. So let's take our chances in the camp of Aram and throw ourselves on their mercy. If they receive us, we'll live. If they kill us, we'll die. We've got nothing to lose. So after the sun went down, they got up and went to the camp of Aram. When they got to the edge of the camp, surprise, not a man in the camp. The master had made the army of Aram hear the sound of horses and a mighty army on the march. They told one another, the king of Israel hired the kings of the Hittites and the kings of Egypt to attack us. Panicked, they ran for their lives. No shoes or nothing, Jesus. Through the darkness, abandoning tents, horses, and donkeys, the whole camp, just as it was, running for dear life. These 4 lepers entered the camp and went into a tent. First, they ate and drank. Then they grabbed silver, gold, and clothing and went off and hid it. Then they came back, entered another tent, looted it, again hiding their plunder. Finally, they said to one another, we shouldn't be doing this. This is a day of good news, and we're making it into a private party. If we wait around until morning, we'll get caught and punished. Come on, let's go tell the news to the king's palace. So they went and called out to the city gate, telling what had happened. We went to the camp of Aram, and surprise, the place was deserted. Not a soul, not a sound. Horses and donkeys left tethered in tents, abandoned just as they were. The gatekeepers got the word to the royal palace, giving them the whole story. Roused in the middle of the night, the king told his servants, let me tell you what Aram has done. They knew that we were starving, so they left camp and have hid in the field, thinking, when they come out of the city, we'll capture them alive and take the city. One of his advisors answered, let some men go and take 5 of the horses left behind. The worst that can happen is no worse than what could happen to the whole city. Let's send them and find out what happened. They took 2 chariots with horses. The king sent them after the army of Aram with orders, scout them out, find out what happened. They went after them all the way to the Jordan. The whole way was strewn with clothes and equipment that Aram had dumped in their panic flight. The scouts came back and reported to the king. The people then looted the camp of Aram. Food prices dropped overnight. A handful of meal for a shekel, 2 handfuls of grain for a shekel. God's word to the letter. The king ordered his attendant, the one he leaned on for support, to be in charge of the city gate. The people turned into a mob, poured through the gate, trampling him to death. It was exactly what the holy man had said when the king had come to see him. Every word of the holy man to the king. A handful of meal for a shekel, 2 handfuls of grain for a shekel this time tomorrow, and the gate of Samaria. With the attendant's sarcastic reply to the holy man, you expect us to believe that? Trapdoors opening in the sky and food tumbling out? Followed by the response, you watch it with your own eyes, but you won't eat so much as a mouthful, proved true. The final stroke came when the people trampled the man to death at the city gate. 2 Kings chapter 8, verse 1. Years before, Elijah told the woman whose son he had brought to life, leave here and go, you and your family, and live someplace else. God has ordered a famine in the land. It will last for 7 years. The woman did what the holy man told her and left. She and her family lived as aliens in the country of Philistia for 7 years. And when the 7 years were up, the woman and her family came back. She went directly to the king and asked for her home and farm. The king was talking with Gehazi, servant of the holy man, saying, tell me some of the stories of the great things Elisha did. It so happened that as he was telling the king the story of the dead person brought back to life, the woman whose son was brought to life showed up asking for a home and farm. Gehazi said, my master the king, this is the woman, and this is her son whom Elisha brought back to life. The king wanted to know all about it, and she told him the story. The king assigned an officer to take care of her, saying, make sure she gets everything back that's hers, plus all profits from the farm from the time she left until now. Elisha traveled to Damascus. Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, was sick at the time. He was told, the holy man is in town. The king ordered Hazael, take a gift with you, go meet the holy man. Ask God through him, am I going to recover from this sickness? Hazael went and met with Elisha. He brought with him every choice thing he could think of from Damascus, 40 camel loads of items. When he arrived, he stood before Elisha and said, your son Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, sent me to ask you, am I going to recover from this sickness? Elisha said, go and tell him, don't worry, you'll live. The fact is, though, God showed me that he's doomed to die. Elisha then stared hard at Hazael, reading his heart. Hazael felt exposed and dropped his eyes, and the holy man wept. Hazael said, "Why does my master weep?" "Because," said Elisha, "I know what you're going to do to the children of Israel. Burn down their forts, murder their youth, smash their babies, rip open their pregnant women." Wow. Hazael said, "Am I a mongrel dog that I do such a horrible thing?" "God showed me," said Elisha, "that you'll be king of Aram." Hazael left Elisha and returned to his master, who asked, "So what did Elijah tell you?" He told me, "Don't worry, you'll live." But the very next day, someone took a heavy quilt, soaked it in water, covered the king's face, and suffocated him. Now Hazael was king. Wow. Jehoram of Judah. In the 5th year of the reign of Joram, son of Ahab, king of Israel, Jehoram, son of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, became king. He was 32 years old when he began his rule and was king for 8 years in Jerusalem. He copied the ways of the kings of Israel, marrying into Ahab's family and continuing the Ahab line of sin. From God's point of view, an evil man living an evil life, but despite that, because of his servant David, God was not ready to destroy Judah. He had, after all, promised to keep a lamp burning through David's descendants. During Jehoram's reign, Edom revolted against Judah's rule and set up their king. Jehoram responded by taking his army to chariots to Zaire. Edom surrounded him, but in the middle of the night, he and his charioteers broke through the lines and hit Edom hard, but his infantry deserted him. Edom continues in revolt against Judah right up until the present. Even little Libnah revolted at that time. The rest of the life and times of Jehoram, the record of his rule, is written in the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah. Jehoram died and was buried in the family grave in the city of David. His son Ahaziah succeeded him as king. Ahaziah of Judah. In the 12th year of the reign of Joram, son of Ahab, king of Israel, Ahaziah, son of Joram, king of Judah, began his reign. Ahaziah was 22 years old when he became king. He ruled only a year in Jerusalem. His mother was Athaliah, granddaughter of Omri, king of Israel. He lived and ruled just like the Ahab family had done, continuing the same evil in God's sight line of sin, related by both marriage and the sin to the Ahab clan. He joined Joram, son of Ahab, king of Israel, in the war against Hazael, king of Aram, at Ramoth Gilead. The archers wounded Joram. Joram pulled back to Jezreel to convalesce from the injuries he had received in the fight with Hazael. Ahaziah, son of Joram, king of Judah, paid a visit to Joram, son of Ahab, on his sickbed in Jezreel. All right, you all have some tongue twisters as names now. 1 Kings chapter, waiting for it to turn, chapter 9, verse 1. Jehu of Israel. One day Elisha the prophet ordered a member of the guild of prophets, "Get yourself ready, take a flask of oil, and go to Ramoth Gilead. Look for Jehu, son of Jehoshaphat, son of Nimshi." Lord, these are some names. "When you find him, get him away from his companions and take him to a back room. Take your flask of oil, pour it over his head, and say, 'This is God's word. I anoint you king over Israel.' Then open the door and get out of there as fast as you can. Don't wait around." The young prophet went to Ramoth Gilead. On arrival, he found the army officers all sitting around. He said, "I have a matter of business with you, officer." Jehu said, "Which one of us?" "With you, officer." He got up, went inside the building. The young prophet poured oil on his head and said, "This is God's word, the God of Israel. I've anointed you to be king over the people of God, over Israel. Your assignment is to attack the regime of Ahab, your master. I'm avenging the massacre of my servants, the prophets. Yes, the Jezebel massacre of all the prophets of God. The entire line of Ahab is doomed. I'm wiping out the entire bunch of that sad lot. I'll see to it that the family of Ahab experiences the same fate as the family of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, and the family of Baasha, son of Ahijah. As for Jezebel, the dogs will eat her carcass in the open fields of Jezreel. No burial for her." Then he opened the door and made a run for it. Jehu went back out to his master's officers. They asked, "Is everything all right? What did that crazy fool want with you?" He said, "You know that kind of talk. You know that kind of man, all talk." "That's a lie." They said, "Tell us what's going on." He said, "He told me this and this and this. In effect, God's word, I anoint you king of Israel." They sprang into action. Each man grabbed his robe. They piled him at the top of the steps for a makeshift throne. Then they blew the trumpet and declared, "Jehu is king." That ignited the conspiracy of Jehu, son of Jehoshaphat, son of Nimshi, against Joram. Meanwhile, Joram and the entire army were defending Ramoth Gilead against Hazael, king of Aram, except that Joram had pulled back to Jezreel to convalesce from the injuries he got from the Arameans in the battle with Hazael, king of Jaram. Jehu said, If you really want to see me as king, don't let anyone sneak out of the city and blab the news in Jezreel. Then Jehu mounted a chariot and rode to Jezreel, where Joram was in bed resting. King Ahaziah of Judah had come down to visit Joram. A sentry standing on the watchtower in Jezreel saw the company of Jehu arrive. He said, I see a band of men. Joram said, get a horseman and send him out to meet him and inquire is anything wrong. The horseman rode out to meet Jehu and said, the king wants to know if there's anything wrong. Jehu said, what is it to you whether things are right or wrong? Fall in behind me. The sentry said, the messenger reached them, but he's not returning. The king then sent a second horseman. When he reached him, he said, the king wants to know if there's anything wrong. Jehu said, what's it to you whether things are right or wrong? Fall in behind me. The sentry said, the messenger reached them, but he's not returning. The driving is like the driving of Jehu, son of Nimshi. Crazy. Joram ordered, get my chariot ready. They hitched up his chariot. Joram, king of Israel, and Ahaziah, king of Judah, each in his own chariot, drove out to meet Jehu. They met in the field of Naboth of Jezreel. When Joram saw Jehu, he called out, good day, Jehu. Jehu answered, what's good about it? How can there be anything good about it as long as the promiscuous whoring and sorceries of your mother Jezebel pollute the country? Joram wheeled his chariot around and fled, yelling to Ahaziah, it's a trap, Ahaziah. Jehu pulled on his bow and released an arrow. It hit Joram between the shoulder blades and went right through his heart. He slumped to his knees in his chariot. Jehu ordered Bidkar, his lieutenant, quick, throw him into the field of Naboth of Jezreel. Remember when you and I were driving our chariots behind Ahab, his father? That's when God pronounced his doom upon him. As surely as I saw the blood of murdered Naboth and his sons yesterday, you'll pay for it on this exact piece of ground. This is God's word. So take him and throw him out in the field. God's instructions carried out to the letter. Ahaziah, king of Judah, saw what was going on and made his escape on the road toward Beth Hagan. Jehu chased him, yelling, get him too. Jehu's troops shot and wounded him in his chariot on the hill up to Gur near Ibleam. He was able to make it as far as Megiddo. There he died. His aides drove on to Jerusalem. They buried him in the family plot in the city of David. In the 11th year of the reign of Joram, son of Ahab, Ahaziah had become king of Judah. When Jezebel heard that Jehu had arrived in Jezreel, she made herself up, put on eyeshadow, and arranged her hair, and posed seductively at the window. When Jehu came through the city gate, she called down, so how are things, Zimri, you dashing king killer? Jehu looked up at the window and called, is there anybody up there on my side? 2 or 3 palace eunuchs looked out. He ordered, throw her down. They threw her out the window. Her blood spattered the wall and the horses, and Jehu trampled her under his horse's hooves. Then that had to be an ugly sight. Then Jehu went inside and ate his lunch. Wow. That's a bad man. During lunch, he gave orders, take care of that damned woman. What? Oh, Jesus. Give her a decent burial. She is, after all, the king's daughter. Wow. I guess that means condemn, but that sure is kind of blunt there. They went out to, my Jesus. They went out to bury her, but there was nothing left of her skull, feet, and hands. They came back and told Jehu. He said, it's God's word, the word spoken by Elisha the Tishbite. In the field of Jezreel, dogs will eat Jezebel. The body of Jezebel will be like dog droppings on the ground in Jezreel. Wow. Old friends and lovers will say, I wonder, is this Jezebel? My Lord. The book of 2 Kings, chapter 10, verse 1. 2 Kings 10 and 1. Ahab had 70 sons still living in Samaria. Jehu wrote letters addressed to the officers of Jezreel, the city elders, those in charge of Ahab's sons, and posted them to Samaria. The letters read, this letter is fair warning. You're in charge of your master's children, chariots, horses, fortifications, and weapons. Pick the best and most capable of your master's sons and put him on the throne. Prepare to fight for your master's position. They were absolutely terrified at the letter. They said, 2 kings have already been wiped out by him. What hope do we have? So they sent the warden of the palace, the mayor of the city, the elders and the guardians to Jehu with this message. We're your servants. Whatever you say, we'll do. We're not making anyone king here. You're in charge. Do what you think best. Then Jehu wrote a second letter. If you're on my side and are willing to follow my orders, here's what you do. Decapitate the sons of your master and bring the heads to me by this time tomorrow in Jezreel. Boy, this is a bad man. The king's sons numbered 70. The leaders of the city had taken responsibility for them. When they got the letter, they took the king's sons and killed all 70. Then they put their heads in baskets and sent them to Jehu in Jezreel. A messenger reported to Jehu, they've delivered the heads of the king's sons. He said, stack them in 2 piles at the city gate until morning. In the morning, Jehu came out, stood before the people, and addressed them formally. Do you realize that this very day you are participants in God's righteous workings? Well, that's what you're saying. True, I'm the one who conspired against my master and assassinated him. But who do you suppose is responsible for this pile of skulls? Know this for certain, not a single syllable that God spoke in judgment on the family of Ahab is canceled. You're seeing it with your own eyes. God doing what through Elijah he said he'd do. Then Jehu proceeded to kill everyone who had anything to do with Ahab's family in Jezreel. Leaders, friends? Why would you kill the friends? What did they do? Priests? He wiped out the entire lot. Guilty by association. That's done. He brushed himself off and set out for Samaria along the way at Beth Eked, binding house of the shepherds. He met up with some relatives of Ahaziah, king of Judah. Jehu said, who are you? They said, we're relatives of Ahaziah, and we've come down to a reunion of the royal family. Uh-oh. Grab them, ordered Jehu. They were taken and then massacred at the well of Beth Eked, 42 of them, no survivors. He went on from there and came upon Jehonadab, the Rechabite, who was on his way to meet him. Greeting him, he said, are we together and of one mind in this? Jehonadab said, we are. Count on me. You better say that. That man will kill you. Then give me your hand, said Jehu. They shook hands on it, and Jehonadab stepped into the chariot with Jehu. Uh-oh. Come on with me, said Jehu, and witness my zeal for God. Together they proceeded in the chariot. When they arrived in Samaria, Jehu massacred everyone left in Samaria who was in any way connected with Ahab, a mass execution, just as God had told Elijah. Now, I don't know whether he said all of that now. I think you all are taking this too far. Next, Jehu got all the people together and addressed them. Ahab served Baal small time. Jehu was serving big time? Oh, that's a trick. Get all the prophets of Baal here, everyone who served him, all his priests. Get everyone here. Don't leave anyone out. I have a great sacrifice to offer Baal. If you don't show up, you won't live to tell about it. Jehu was lying, of course. He planned to destroy all the worshipers of Baal. Jehu ordered, make preparation for a holy convocation for Baal. Now, that's a hot mess. They did and posted the date. Jehu then summoned everyone in Israel. They came in droves, every worshiper of Baal in the country. Nobody stayed home. They came and packed the temple of Baal to capacity. But you, the king, you told them to come out. They're just following what you said. Jehu directed the keeper of the wardrobe, get robes for all the servants of Baal. He brought out their robes. Jehu and Jehonadab, the Rechabite, now entered the temple of Baal and said, double check and make sure that there are no worshipers of God in here. Only Baal worshipers are allowed. They launched the worship, making the sacrifices and burnt offerings. Meanwhile, Jehu had stationed 80 men outside with orders, don't let a single person escape. If you do, it's your life or his life. When Jehu had finished with the sacrificial solemnities, he signaled to the officers and guards, enter and kill, no survivors. And the bloody slaughter began. The officers and guards threw the corpses outside and cleared the way to enter into the shrine of Baal. They hauled out the sacred phallic stone from the temple of Baal and pulverized it. They smashed the Baal altars and tore down the Baal temple. It's been a public toilet ever since. And that's the story of Jehu's wasting of Baal in Israel. But for all that, Jehu didn't turn back from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, the sins that had dragged Israel into a life of sin. The golden calves in Bethel and Dan stayed. God commended Jehu. You did well to what I saw was best. You did what I ordered against the family of Ahab. As reward, your sons will occupy the throne of Israel for 4 generations. Even then, though Jehu wasn't careful to walk in God's ways and honor the God of Israel from an undivided heart, he didn't turn back from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, who led Israel into a life of sin. It was about this time that God began to shrink Israel. Hazael hacked away at the borders of Israel from the Jordan to the east, all the territory of Gilead, Gad, Reuben, and Manasseh from Arior, near the brook, in effect, all Gilead and Bashan. The rest of life in times of Jehu, his accomplishments and fame, I guess so, with all that killing, good Lord, are written in the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel. Jehu died and was buried in the family plot in Samaria. His son Jehoahaz was the next king. Jehu ruled from Samaria for 28 years. Wow. This is the word of the